All right, Mr. Jared Weems from weemsmotorco. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, sir.
Well, what's up, guys? How you doing, man?
Oh, living the dream, sir. How you been?
Oh, man, been well. I got through the holiday season, moving into 2021. I'm excited about it. Yeah, doing good, buddy.
Awesome. So for those of you out there that do not know Jared, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself real quickly, if you would?
Sure, man. So I'd have to say, number one, that I'm a husband, a father, motorcycle builder, lover of all things old. I don't care what it is. If it's older than me, I think it's cool. So yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell, man.
That's awesome. So just real quickly before we get into it, and I'll put the links in there, where could they find you online?
Sure. My number one place, everybody hit me up, weemsmotorco.com. That's the website. Find a lot of information about where we come from, what we're doing, some of the builds that we've done before. A lot of our social media is done through Instagram, and that's weemsmotorco.tampa. And that's also the same on Facebook, weemsmotorco.tampa.
Awesome. So I guess to start it out, what got you into motorcycling?
Oh, man. So I'd have to chuck that up to my ancestors, I guess you would say. I'm a fourth generation motorcycle rider.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I've got pictures of my great uncle riding on an old inline four-cylinder Indian. My grandfather, when he came home from World War II, he bought a brand new Harley-Davidson flathead. My dad was a motorcycle builder, motorcycle mechanic, did the whole choppers thing through the 70s. And yeah, and then just kind of the bug was already in my blood. So I didn't, get into motorcycling till later, but I got to it.
That's awesome. So now you're pretty much a vintage Triumph guy, correct?
Yeah. I tell a lot of people I do the shows and stuff. People come up to me, and say, "Hey, will you work on my bike?" And first thing I ask is, what kind of bike is it and what year it is. I love vintage motorcycles, and I'll work on any vintage motorcycle, but I specialize in the Triumphs.
Oh, that's awesome. So now you even work on newer bikes, or do you kind of keep the carbureted bikes?
I work on any motorcycle. If you're a good enough friend. So, the reason I say the reason I say it, I have enough work of my own, a lot of, my own projects going on. But if you're a good friend, man, I'm all about keeping people on the road, keep people riding. Yeah, I've worked on, I think the newest motorcycle that I've ever worked on was it was in 2019. I was working on a 2018 Indian Chieftain. So nice.
Very nice.
I mean, it's a nice bike, but it's not my thing. I look at motorcycles as having a soul and a life, and a new motorcycle to me, they're cool, they're awesome, and you get out and have a lot of fun on them, but they just haven't had life yet. They haven't had a soul breathed into them yet.
That's fair. I mean, that's the one thing that, I'm not a gearhead by any means, but I find it interesting is everyone says that same thing, is that, the older bikes have that soul to them, especially if you have to kickstart it.
Yeah, no, we won't talk about that. But yeah, they have soul in them. Usually the soul means that you're having to turn wrenches and work on them and keep them going. So it's almost a relationship that you build with these motorcycles. And just to bounce off what you're saying about kickstarting, I've had this poster for a long time. I don't have it hung up in the shop anymore, but it was a picture of it was just a guy's boot on a kickstart, and it said kickstart. It's how real men start their motorcycles. And this thing had to come out. This poster was probably from the 80s when electric starts were just coming around. So I just thought it was hilarious because all of my motorcycles are kickstart.
That's funny. Yeah, I guess it's things you definitely take it for granted. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you do. But there's something nice to be said where you just walk out and hit a button and jump on and go. You really don't have that with the vintage motorcycles. You got to maintain and keep working on them.
Yeah. Now, do you remember? I mean, I know that your dad had the Bonneville. It's on your website. That's an amazing looking bike. Was that the first bike that you rode, or do you remember
No,
when you got to that point?
no, that was so that bike didn't come along until a little bit later. So kind of the story of my first street bike. I had 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, dirt bikes and stuff growing up.
Ah, the dreaded 3-wheeler.
Oh man, the Honda 110 ATV, man, big balloon tires. Those things were awesome. Yeah, no. So my very first street bike, I got it in, I believe it was late 2004, and I had joined the military, and I was in special operations, and I was rolling out on my very first deployment to Iraq. And I called up my dad and I said, hey, I'm thinking about, getting a bike. I'd like to find an old Triumph because that's what I remember he had when I was growing up. And I was like, well, just keep your eye out, put your ear to the ground, see if you find something. If I make it back, then, I'd like to get into a project.
First off, thank you for your service, and I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. It was an honor to serve. And what I always tell everybody is, thank you for the paycheck because I wouldn't have done it if you didn't pay me to do it. So
fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, as the story goes, I came home from Iraq in 2004, and my dad had this 1972 Triumph Bonneville that was fully restored, sitting there as a gift for me. And so that got me on 2 wheels on the street. And that was my very first street bike, was a vintage Triumph that was older than me.
Wow. I was going to say that. Yeah. Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. It was a great bike.
And it was restored, I assume, at that point?
It was restored. The guy that did the restoration did an amazing job, but it was an older restoration. When I say older, it was probably, 3 or 4 year old restoration.
Okay.
And so it just needed a little bit of maintenance to get it tightened up, to get it back on the road. And didn't take me very long. But that was what was great, because I cut my teeth on that bike. Being a vintage Triumph, I just started diving into the old manuals and getting online and getting into different forums and finding out as much as I can. And man, that bug quickly bit me within.
That's cool.
I'd say within 4 years, I probably had another 4 or 5 Triumphs sitting in the garage.
Wow. No, what's the newest Triumph that you've owned?
The newest year?
Year. So you pretty much, like we said, you probably stay carbureted, right, then? Oh,
yeah. Triumph didn't go fuel injected until, I don't know, like 2016, 17, something like that.
Okay.
But, the newest one that I've owned was a 1976. And I don't really like the 76s and later because that's the year they went from right foot shift to left foot shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a stickler for the old stuff, and all my bikes have the shifter on the right hand side, and I said it's on the right side because it's on the right side. So
that's cool. I forgot about that. Yeah, so that's a skill in itself.
It's not too bad. I tell a lot of people, I have some friends come over, and out of fun, I throw them on the oldest motorcycle that I have here, and I let them ride it. And they've never ridden, motorcycles that old, and they've never ridden, something with a right foot shift, and they do perfectly fine. I tell everybody it's just in the oh crap situation. When somebody pulls out in front of you, or you have to slam on the brakes really quick. That's, when you have your muscle memory built, that's the only time that factor will ever come in. Outside of that, just normal riding, you'll pick it up really fast.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could. Now, with a bike that old, and forgive me, this may be a dumb question, but are you like some of these hardcore guys where you'll ride it anywhere? Or do you try and limit it to?
My daily, what I call my daily rider is my 1966 Triumph Bonneville, my dad's bike that I did the restoration on. I wouldn't have any problems jumping on that bike and, rolling out for 3 hours. These bikes, they're built in 1966. They're not really built for, the traffic up, the traffic of today, or the speed limits of today. I'll get them out and jump on the interstate and, wind it up to 70, 75. But man, that's pretty much tops for these bikes. And it's not because they can't do more, because they can do more, but holding those speeds for long distance, they're rigid mounted motor, parallel twin. That means both cylinders are firing at the same time, side by side. There's a lot of vibration in it, and it'll quickly, you ever sit outside and weed eat your yard for like 2 hours and your hands are just numb? Same experience on these old Triumphs. So that's kind of something you got to deal with. But also holding those RPMs, these are a high revving motor. Holding those high RPMs for a long time, it's just not good on the motors. But
sure.
I mean, if we're taking back roads, driving, fluctuating speeds, 45, 65, I can drive those things all day long.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I was just wondering, because I know that a lot of people that have bikes that older, it seems to be, well, I think it's with any rider, it's either there's no limitation or it's I only ride at the Starbucks on Sundays.
Well, I have a couple bikes that are
Starbucks
they're only up to the brewery and back. It's like, you've probably seen on the website or on Instagram, I call it the coronavirus bike, also known as the Rainmaker.
Okay,
and,
that's the blue one, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So that bike is a 52 Triumph Thunderbird, same year and model that Marlon Brando rode in the Wild One. And,
nice.
that movie came out in 53. But that bike, I put $0. I just grabbed junk that I had laying around that was correct for the bike. I'd been collecting pieces and parts for a long time. I put no money in it. I made all of the gaskets by hand. I used old piston rings, everything, old bearings, everything on the inside of that motor is just old used parts.
Awesome.
But I can crawl back there on it right now, and I could fire it right up. It'll start right up and run and idle, and it's a great bike. But when you have tires that are on it that are probably at least 60 years old, including the tube in the rear tire, I've never taken them apart. I just like, hey, it's together. It holds air. Right? It holds air. We're putting this thing together. We're going to have some fun. I'll ride it around the neighborhood. I've taken it, I think probably the furthest I've taken that bike for a ride, probably 10, 15 miles.
Okay.
And that was the round trip, a total of 10, 15 miles. Outside of that, it's like I said, the tires are old, dry rotted. They're hard as a rock. They're probably so hard I can't tell if they got air in the tires or not. They're just holding up my own hard. That's so wrong. But it's so fun. It's so fun.
Who checks their air pressure anyway? I don't.
It looks low, you put air in it. That's what I say.
Oh, that's funny. Now, is it hard? I'm assuming it's getting pretty hard to still find parts for those bikes.
It is, and the more I get into them, the older I like. And obviously, the older they are, the harder they are to find parts for. My ultimate goal is to build a 49 Triumph.
Nice.
And the reason I say that was because my dad had a 49 Triumph when I was growing up, and it was a no frills, just stripped down little bobber. And but I've always wanted to build my dad's bike. I could never find my dad's bike. Who knows where that thing's at. But the closest I found, I found a 48 Triumph a buddy had, and I could probably still buy that motorcycle, but I'm real stickler for that year. 49 is where I'm going to be at. The bike that I'm building right now, the other David Mann Triumph, I'm using the motor, and that's a 1951 motor.
Okay.
So that's been the oldest that I've owned is 51, and I've had 2 of those.
Okay. Well, that's a good segue. You mentioned the David Mann bike, and I'm a big art guy. I love art, and my wife's an artist. That's the thing that I'm really curious about. What about that picture drew you to wanting to do that bike?
You know, I never seen that picture before, and really it's one of David Mann's more eclectic, more rare images. And since I've started this project, it's picked up a lot of publicity, and a lot of people have found more interest in it. But what got me with that picture was the reason I got out of the military. I developed a brain tumor. Wow. And shortly after that, I started having seizures and was diagnosed with epilepsy. And during that time, I had, I think, 11 motorcycles that I had at that point. And, you know, when you find out some news like that, you don't know if you're going to live a day or going to live a year. You don't know what's going on. And I had this huge collection of motorcycles and tools, and, you know, I had a full motorcycle shop. And I basically said, you know, I need to not leave my wife and my kids with all of this, you know, what they would consider mess, junk, whatever. So I just started selling everything. I sold some motorcycles that were really close to my heart. The first custom motorcycle that I ever built, I sold that. The first show bike that I ever built that was featured in several magazines, I sold that. And then just some other motorcycles. And the only thing I ended up keeping was my dad's 66 Triumph. But during that time, going through shutting everything down, an old friend of mine, he's an old gray bearded biker guy. And he came over to the house and said, I got something for you. He knew I was going through a tough time. And he gave me this old sun faded, you know, picture from a magazine of a David Mann painting. And it was so sun faded. It was literally, you know, brown and black and gray. There was no color left to it. And, but I could tell in the image, I was like, wow, there's a Triumph in that. And it blew me away because I never knew that David Mann ever painted a Triumph. And, you know, I was just going through my health stuff. And so I just kind of set it up on the shelf and didn't pay no attention to it until 2018, around September 2018, Mike Davis put out an invitation on Instagram saying that he was going to be doing a Triumph pre-unit only show within Born Free. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. I'd love to just go check out these bikes and, you know, and just see these old Triumphs and stuff. That's, you know, it's what I love. And so I reached out to Mike, and we just started this conversation, and, you know, and he quickly realized who I was from some of my prior builds and from being in magazines. And he's like, man, I'd really love you to bring a bike out. He's like, do you have, you know, this other bike that I had in the magazine? I was like, no, I had, you know, I had to sell everything. And he was like, well, I'd love you to build a bike if you can. If not, I want you to come out to the show at least. And so I sat down with my wife that night, and, you know, I said, hey, I got this opportunity to build another motorcycle. And, you know, first thing she asked was, how's your health? You know, do you think, you know, we could take on this project? Because it was just, you know, 3 months prior to that, I had a seizure in July of 2018. And I was like, well, I think I can do this. And if not, so be it. And so, and then the next thing she asked, you know, was, well, where's it at? And I told her California, and she's like, oh, that's cool. Like
the wife answered, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, we're in Florida. So then she said, can I go? Can we bring the kids? And I was like, yeah, I don't see why not. Let's make a vacation out of it. Drive cross country from Florida to California. And then so after that, basically she was like, okay, I'm on board, you know. And so I started the process of building this bike. Now, in the meantime, I had just a few months prior to that, I had a military buddy that was deployed with me to Iraq several times, really close friend, and his father had passed away. And he told me that his dad had this huge motorcycle collection, and that they were trying to work through, you know, selling them off for the, you know, because nobody in their family was into motorcycles. I was like, okay, cool. You know, what kind of motorcycles are they? And so he's like, well, he really liked Harley-Davidson and Triumphs. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, I know about the Triumphs. I can help you out with that. I know enough about Harleys to know the value. So he's like, yeah, my sister just sold a 56 Panhead that he had just done the complete restoration on. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, I've always wanted a 56 Panhead. That was the year my dad was born. And I was like, well, how much money did y'all get out of it? And he was like, 35. And I was like, 35,000? He's like, no, 3,500. And I was like, what? And I quickly told him, I was like, stop, call your sister right now. Do not sell another thing. Obviously, somebody took advantage of him, a fully restored. He showed me pictures of it. It was beautiful. Oh. And 56 Panhead, $3,500. So we literally, I told him to stop. And within the next week, we jumped in a truck and had a trailer and drove 19 and a half hours straight to this little town in Illinois and helped load up everything. I told him, let's bring it back to Tampa, because a lot of the bikes were in the midst of restoration or parts bikes or, you know, just whatever. And so we loaded everything up, brought it back here to Tampa, downloaded everything here at my shop, and I just systematically started going through all the Triumph things and putting, you know, hey, this motor goes with this frame and this transmission goes with this bike, and this is the tank that goes for this year. And so I just started helping him systematically go through those and selling them. And as a gift for going through all that work, he's like, you can pick whichever motorcycle you want and keep it as a gift to you. And, you know, I'm such good friends with him, and I was going through all the health stuff. I was like, I don't need a bike. I just sold all these. I don't need a project. I was like, but I love pre-unit Triumphs, and every Triumph that he had they were all pre-units. So it's like, if you don't know what pre-unit is, it's basically 1962 and earlier, the transmissions were separated from the motor. They're two separate units, like a Harley-Davidson. In 1963, they put the transmission and the motor all in one casing. It became a unit.
Okay.
So one unit. So I didn't want to take anything that would, you know, cause the family to not gain any money. So I took the most piece of junk motorcycle that they had. It was completely chopped up and modified. And I just stuck it in the corner. And so when this Mike Davis thing came down, you know, my wife's like, well, do you have a bike to build? And I was like, well, I got that old, you know, 52 Speed Twin sitting in the corner. I could do something with that. And she's like, okay. And so my wheels started turning. You know, I had a couple of those sleepless nights that's like, you know, I could build this, I could build that. And I walked out to the garage one day, and I'm just kind of like standing there, and I look over to the shelf and I see that old sun-faded picture, and I was like, how cool would it be to build that bike? And I'm like, then I go over and I start looking at it. I'm like, I've got that part. I've got that part. It's the correct frame. I could possibly do this. I was like, awesome. I could possibly do this. I might be able to pull this one off. And so I just started pulling things out and kind of mocking things up, and finally, you know, got to the place where I was like, I can do it. Let's do this. And
that's awesome.
So that's what I did. I mean, but in the process of that, you know, I could see from the sun faded picture, you know, kind of what the motorcycle was, but I didn't know what color it was. I didn't know what was chrome or what was painted. I was like, I just didn't really know. And so luckily I found through some connections at Easy Rider magazine,
nice.
I found the original owner of the painting, and they were able to send me some pictures, and I found out which magazine issue it was in. So I jumped on eBay, bought a couple of those magazines just to have the reference. And so yeah, it started the ball in the process, man. That's why I built that bike.
Now, do you think that was part of healing for you? I mean, do you think that changed you being able to do that again? I mean, with going through all that, for lack of a better word, trauma and those health experiences, do you think that was part of the healing process for you to sort of come back to a sense of normalcy, if you will?
Yeah, definitely. It was, before, all the health stuff, I was, running a motorcycle shop, being full-time in the military. It was a job. And, you have clients calling you saying, hey, when's my bike going to get done? And, you're just dealing with business. But this reapproach, it was completely different. It was like, it was my garage became, my sanctuary. I tell a lot of people, it's a place where I could go and not think about anything, or go and think about everything. But I wasn't thinking about a client. I wasn't thinking about, what I needed to do their bike. It was just like, hey, I have a timeline to build this motorcycle, and I'm going to take full advantage of that timeline. I'm not going to put myself in a bind where I'm stressed out, because I didn't want it to be that. I wanted this to be, motorcycle therapy per se, just a moment where I could just go out and do something that I miss doing and love to do.
I think that's amazing. And that's the reason I ride, is for the therapeutic value of it. It's amazing that so many people bring that up. I mean, anybody you talk to, it's wind therapy. It's for whatever the ailment is, it seems to be really the thing that changes them, that helps.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting.
A lot of people ask me about riding and stuff. And, I have a bit of anxiety about, getting back onto a bike and riding, especially going through, the tumor and the seizures and stuff.
Sure.
So I'm really cautious when it comes to that. And I'm not gonna lie, there's a bit of fear in it.
I can believe it.
I mean, it's not like you're, in a vehicle, you're in this metal cage that you're a little bit more protected, but on a motorcycle, you don't have that. And, I have a wife and 2 amazing kids that depend on me and love me, and that want me to be there.
Do they get involved in motorcycles at all? Is it a family affair?
So it is a family affair, because it's kind of become our lives.
Okay.
And but my wife is, she'll jump on the back and ride. But once again, I don't ride that much.
Sure.
We did early on in my life, or in our marriage, on that 72 Bonneville, man, would go out and have a blast. But my wife's a hairdresser, and putting on a helmet is not one of her most happy things to do. So messes up her hair. But that's funny. Yeah, my daughter is she's 11, and she's probably going to be the next generation for us. I can't go out to the garage without her coming out to see what's going on, or I can't start a motorcycle without her saying, hey, will you take me for a ride and stuff. So I really love that. I wish I have a son. He has autism, and we've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just not his interest. I mean, he'll come out to the garage and kind of be like, oh, and then he's quick like, okay, I'm not interested in this. So he moves on. I love it to death. I was like, I get it, because when I was a kid, I really wasn't into motorcycles either. Mm-hmm. So.
No, my kids are the same way. My oldest has been on the bike. My youngest, who's 16, it's like, Nate, you gonna go for a ride? Maybe. One of these days. I'm like, but dude, wouldn't it be like the coolest thing in the world? Like, come on.
It's like, can I hold my cell phone behind?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how does this work? So, yeah, I think that's probably the only time I can get my daughter off of her cell phone, is get her on the back of the bike, and she's just, grin ear to ear and loves it to death. But, what you said earlier on is, about riding vintage motorcycles. I've been, over the last few months, over the midst of this whole project with Forgotten Angels and the Raffle, and working with all these magazines and everything that's been going on, I've been getting this itch to do some riding and to do some distance riding. I just don't have a motorcycle to do it, but
you talked about that on Instagram the other day. You're going out on a ride though, aren't you?
Yeah. So we finally tonight, well, today, whatever,
wherever we are.
I don't know when this is going to air. Whoever, if you're watching this during the daytime,
It's daytime.
Yeah, so we finally placed a date. We've had
Awesome.
We've had a location in mind, and so I've got a good friend. He's got a few motorcycles, and some that are new motorcycles that you can hit a start button.
Nice.
And, yeah.
Now, are you going to trash talk it the whole time? Be like, we're an older bike.
No, I'm not. And the reason I'm not is because he's letting me ride a Triumph. So
okay, fair enough. He kept you in your realm. Okay.
Yeah, no, he was pretty adamant about it. So I was like, he's like, I could ride the. Awesome. I was like, I could ride the Harley. Da, da, da. He's like, no, you need to ride the Triumph. And I'm like,
oh, that's great.
Okay, cool. I was like, and it's a really cool Triumph too.
Awesome.
So.
What year Triumph is it? I assume it's pretty new.
I don't know exactly. It's a newer Triumph. I would say it's probably a 18, probably 18. I don't think.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're gonna do this trip down to Lake Okeechobee, and we're gonna do an overnight camping trip.
Nice.
And so we're gonna drive down to Lake Okeechobee, camp out that night, and then the next day we're gonna do the complete loop around Lake Okeechobee, which is about a 2.5 hour drive or ride. And then hit the road on the way back. And on the way back, we're going to go straight over to the west coast of Florida and just drive right up the coast highway.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Beach view all the way. And just till we get back up here to Tampa. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I was just talking with him today. I was like, all of the social media mess that's been going on, and I was just like, all right, I need to make this trip happen. And I'm just not, I'll turn off all notifications on the phone except for my wife needs to call me. I'll be available. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
It's amazing. That's the plus and the minus of social media. It's cool that you can be on social media, but then it sort of becomes just a never-ending grind, especially with you having a company, and that popularity.
Yeah, having a company and trying to keep it a hobby is the toughest thing. It's been a huge blessing to see. I pretty much kicked off the Instagram about the same time that I kicked off the project. And in a short amount of time, man, we're over 4,000 followers, and that's a very humbling thing. I got some friends, that have hundreds of thousands of followers, but to me, just being a guy working in his own little shop, doing it on his own as a hobby, it's a very humbling experience to see us reach 4,000 followers. So,
well, that's the thing that I think it's amazing. So tell us what the David Mann project's really about. This fascinates me. I think this is an amazing story.
Yeah. So, I started the project as, like I said, as this cool idea. Hey, I can build this motorcycle, bring it out to Born Free, a show that I've always wanted to go to. Never been to California. I've always wanted to go. So all of these opportunities. And I was about 75% done with the assembly on the motorcycle. Like everything was done. I was just putting the pieces back together. And there was this friend of mine that just kept telling me, he's like, hey, you got to go out here to this organization. You got to see what they're doing for these kids. And it was just scheduling was tough. And finally one day they reached out and I'm like, okay, I got to do this. Otherwise you're just going to keep asking me. I just got to go out and do it. So I make the phone call to Cindy, which is the president of the organization. And it's like, hey, somebody told me I need to link up with you guys. Maybe I have something to offer. And really at that point.
This is Forgotten Angels, right?
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm just making sure that we're.
Yeah. I was trying to lead people in, but you just go ahead and
I'm new to this and I ruined it. Okay. So what I meant to say.
Anticipation. Yeah, so I go out there to Forgotten Angels, and they're not very far away from me. They're probably maybe 10 miles away from me. And as I'm going out there, I looked at their website and I seen what they're doing. I'm like, okay, this is really cool. So I drive out to the property, and they have a 12-acre property. And when you pull through the front gates, man, what caught me was right at the gates at the very front is a sign that says "Welcome Home." Wow. And I was like, man, just that by itself, you know, that'll grip your heart, knowing what these kids have went through. So you pull in through the gates, and there's these two huge ponds that are on each side of the road, and you kind of pull through, and it ends to their pavilion. And so I'm just like kind of taking it in. I see, you know, these little tiny homes all over the place. I'm like, this is really cool. I was like, this is really neat. And so I go up and I sat down with David and Cindy, and I'm just kind of talking them through, you know, what they're doing for these boys. And, you know, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what do I have to offer these kids? Mm-hmm. You know, I was like, and they're talking about, you know, life skills. And I'm like, well, I have all these skills, you know, being in the military, number one, or number two, you know, fabrication skills, you know, teach a kid how to weld, how to, you know, work on motorcycles, whatever. So I'm thinking through this process, and I asked him, I was like, well, what do you guys need? And they said, well, the main thing that we need is financial support to build more homes for these kids, because we want to get more kids off the streets. And I was like, I'm in the middle of a motorcycle build. I have zero money left. Like, I literally drained the savings account to build this motorcycle. And I'm like, I don't have that to offer. I'm just sitting there. And it was just like, you know, I don't know if you believe in God speaking to you or whatever, but it was like that voice coming into your head, give them your motorcycle. And I was like, you know, you try to ignore it, but it's like, you know, this is, you know, it's something bigger than you, and, you know, you can do something amazing with your hobby. Is that something that you've done? And so I right there sitting at that table, we begin to have that conversation. I was like, look, I have this motorcycle. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever done a raffle or what that looks like for you guys, or I didn't even know if they were into motorcycles. They might have like, hey, this tattooed, bearded biker guy coming up here, you know, and
you're having the God moment. You've taken over. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was like super weird. And I turned to David, and he's like, yeah, actually we did a motorcycle raffle like 3 years ago. And I was like, really? Okay, that takes a little bit of, you know, I don't have to, you know, figure out all the logistics of doing a raffle, because I'm having this thought process as I'm sitting in front of them. And so that started that conversation. And so I told him, I was like, look, you can have this motorcycle. Let's, you know, let me do the shows. Let me take it out to Born Free, and maybe let it get a little bit of exposure, and, you know, maybe it'll gain value and be able to do that. And so they're like, cool, let's do this. That's and awesome. So it started the process. And, you know, and after that meeting, I was like, man, I have such an opportunity with these boys to build a relationship with them. And I told David, I was like, hey, bring some of these boys over to the shop. I want to have them see the motorcycle. I was like, I want them to have them see the motorcycle. And, you know, if they're interested in working on motorcycles, they can help me finish it up. And so he brought like 4 or 5 boys over one day. Man, I had those kids polishing parts and bolting things.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So it was like, I wanted to make sure that they knew that the project was theirs as much as it was mine. And so built these great relationships with these boys, and, you know, we had a great time, you know, sweating in the shop, and, you know, nicking our fingers and joking around and having a good time. And so, you know, we finished up the bike together. And then the final day, I had called a good friend of mine, Eric Runyon. He's a professional motorcycle photographer, shot for numerous magazines. And I was like, hey, you know, I've got this project going on. I'd like you to come over and take some shots as we're taking the motorcycle off the assembly table. And he came over, and he quickly found out what was going on, and he's all on board. He's like, look, I want to help you out, whatever I can have to offer for this project. You know, I want to make sure that people know what's going on. And just after that, it was just like snowballs, man. Yeah, I reached out to a couple friends. I was like, you know, just raffling off the motorcycle is, you know, is cool. But I know people want more. I guess that's probably about the best way you could say it. So I was like, okay, well, how cool would it be to get, you know, maybe the painting on display with the motorcycle at the show, just to build some more. That didn't work out. However, Easy Rider magazine, after I told them what I'm doing with the motorcycle, they jumped on board for this project. And
it's awesome.
Yeah, they said, so we're going to release this painting to the first time to the public. It had never, other than the original time that it was featured in the magazine in July of '83. They said, we're going to release it just for this project, and we're going to do a limited edition prints. We're giving you print number 1. It's the only one on canvas in the original size of the original painting. We're giving that to you, but you got to give it to the person who wins the bike. And I was like, that sounds awesome. That's amazing. So Easy Rider jumped on board with that. Through the midst of it, I got a message from somebody on Facebook, and I was like, I don't know who this is. Opened up the message, and they're like, hey, I'm David Mann's daughter. I'd love to talk to you about this project that you're doing. And I was like, holy cow. I was like, absolutely. How fast can I get on the phone? So I started talking to her, and she was like, they quickly see my heart and what I wanted to do for these kids.
Sure.
And she was like, I want you to be able to talk to my mom, and which is David Mann's wife.
Yeah.
And so she gave me her number, and I'm like, number one, I'm like fanboying out, you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, is she going to answer? What's going on? Like that. So I call her up, and she answers, and I introduce myself, and, you know, we have this, 2-hour conversation on the phone, and she's telling me all these stories. You know, when David was alive, he passed away in 2004. How he was inspired, you know, to do his paintings. And we talked about that painting in specific. And I discovered that the blonde woman in the painting is actually Jackie Mann, his wife. So a lot of cool stuff. So they jumped on board. They're like, hey, we want to give some stuff for the raffle too, from the David Mann official store. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of building this momentum. And for a long time, I've known Tyler from Lowbrow Customs. I've known him since he used to sell stickers and T-shirts out of the back of his van. And so I just reached out to him. I'm like, what's the worst they could say? No.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him and said, hey, you know, I would, you know, I'm doing this thing. And I originally reached out to him to see if he would donate a Biltwell helmet. And so he was like, why don't you just contact Biltwell? You know, I was like, well, I don't know anybody at Biltwell. He's like, here's Bill's number. Call Bill. And I'm like, this is like cold calling weird stuff. I'm like,
hello.
Yeah, Tyler gave me your number. I want to get a helmet for a raffle. And I told him what's going on. He's like, no, absolutely. He's like, what size do you need? And so he was like, tell you what size do you wear? And I was like, okay, well, I wear this size. And he's like, all right, I'm going to send you a helmet. You just got to put it on display with the motorcycle as one of the raffle prizes. When the raffle's done, that's your helmet. He's like, the winner, I'm going to give them a code so they can go on the website, pick any helmet they want in their size. And he's like, that's the prize. So I was like, oh, awesome. And so I called Tyler back. And I was like, hey, man, I was like, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. That was super awesome. He's like, so what did Bill do for you? And I was like, oh, he did this. He's like, well, I'm going to match it. And so Tyler threw in like a $500 pack, because 2 helmets at Biltwell is essentially $500. And Tyler's like, here's $500. Go on the website, purchase a bunch of swag, a bunch of things, anything you want, add that as part of the raffle prize. And I was like, man, this is too cool. I was like, now I have my hands full, because this is like a full.
Now it's become a project.
Yeah, this has become a full deal thing. And I was like, and I don't know how to run a raffle. I was like, this does not make any sense. So I got online and I started doing a lot of research, and obviously got in touch with a lawyer to make sure that we had all of our T's crossed and I's dotted, doing everything legal. And yeah, so it's been a blast to see it go. Not to say that it hasn't been work. It's been a lot of work, a lot of shows, a lot of traveling, a lot of promoting, but it's been great to see.
That's the thing that I admire so much about you, is that you've gone through your own hardships, but you found it in your heart to give back, and not in just a way of like, it affects one person. Don't get me wrong. That's great when you can do something for one person, but to do something that's that big. I mean, I was dumbstruck that when you had the issue with Instagram, that so many, I mean, I must have seen your picture everywhere. That's all my feed was. But that's great, because that's what the community's about. And it's amazing the outpouring that you can get from the community.
Yeah. I've always had this saying, that, and I've told it to a lot of friends, right comes out right. If you're doing the right thing, it's going to come out right. If you're doing something shady or backwards, you're going to get found out, and it's not going to be good.
No.
So, I just kind of sit back and trust that, when Instagram shuts down my account for the third, fourth, how many times I decided
how many times are we at this point?
I'm like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm like, it is what it is. Right comes out right. I know that I'm helping these kids, and it's been a blast. We kicked the raffle off on August 1st. And we're just now rolling into, we're just right at the 5th month, I guess. I have to go back and look officially, but as of this past week, we're already over $48,000 that we've raised for for Forgotten Angels. So it's like,
holy smokes, that's a lot of tickets. Wow,
it's a lot. It's well over. We're pushing 3,000. So, yeah. To stop and think about, I know the number that it cost me to build that motorcycle.
Sure.
And I know what that motorcycle, without any of the attachments that, with being in magazines or on the cover of a magazine, or the attachments with David Mann or anything, I know what the value of that is. Mm-hmm. And because I know vintage stripes. And so to see that this, is much more, what I look at is much more than that motorcycle. Mm-hmm. It's much more than that limited edition print. It's much more than that helmet from Biltwell. It's much more than that package from Lowbrow. It's much more the Weems Motorco and David Mann official store. It's the people that have come alongside, have caught the same vision that I had in that moment when I was sitting down with David and Cindy and said, we can help these kids. I tell people all the time at the shows, don't buy a t-shirt, don't buy stickers. I'll stinking give you a t-shirt. Buy raffle tickets to help mm-hmm. these kids. And it's, I've had a few people jump on board, some other moto bloggers, say, I want to do what you're doing. I'm like, oh, it's a lot of work. I'll give you some pointers, but
don't do it. That's the pointer.
But it's not a business venture.
Sure.
I tell you, I am not keeping a penny from everything. When I built that bike, all of the money that I invested into it, I look at that as my gift to Forgotten Angels. Not only that, but going to the shows and setting up and talking for hours and hours and days to complete strangers to tell them about Forgotten. That's my gift to them once again.
Sure.
When I go to these events, and this isn't to pat myself on the back, but I want people to understand their money is not going to anything except to help those kids. When I go to these events and I have to pay for a vendor spot, that comes out of my pocket. And the only way that I'm able to do that is selling t-shirts and hats and stickers. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't happen a lot. So a lot of it's, me and my wife sitting down and was like, we know this is bigger than us. We know that, this is God's plan for our life right now to do this project. So we just bite the bullet and say, and I talk to David and Cindy, and sometimes, they've had people come in and sponsor, some of these vendor spots are not cheap. They're $300-$400 for a vendor spot. And they'll have somebody that they know sponsor to get us at the event to sell raffle tickets to,
That's
in
awesome.
turn. So it's just been a very, I say a very humbling experience, but I'm just blessed to be a part of it. To to be willing and able to do it. Number one, being, medically retired and having the time to do it. But it's not an easy process, and it's not a business adventure. Trust me. Like I said, I'm getting zero. I'm losing thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to this project. But to know that those kids are going to have a home, and when they pull through those gates, they're going to see that sign that says "Welcome Home." That's it for me, man. That's all that matters to me.
Wow. I mean, yeah. I just think it's amazing. I mean, you're an amazing individual to do that. I mean, there's just not enough words for that. So how can anybody that sees this, how can the community support you? Is the raffle ticket the way? Is it getting more vendors involved? What do you need from us?
Well, I mean, number one, it's the raffle that gets the money from me to them, from you to me to them, and it's just a straight funnel through. And you can purchase the raffle tickets whether you're at an event. We take cash cards, whatever you want to do. If you're not able to see us at an event, you can just go straight to the website, weemsmotorco.com. There'll be a raffle tab at the top. You just click on that, and it'll take you right in. You can see pictures, and you can see some videos from Forgotten Angels, what they're doing for these kids. You can read all of the pages of legal stuff that talks about all the different prizes, if you win, all that things. So yeah, that's the main avenue of approach. If you're a business and you're watching this and you cannot purchase raffle tickets for legal reasons and you want to donate directly, just go to forgottenangelsflorida.org, and you can donate straight to the organization through that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I don't need your support. The only support I need is for people to spread the word about the project that we're doing. I'm not a business. Weems Motor Co. is not a business. It's a hobby. It's a passion. It's something I love to do. And whether I get a dime or a project or somebody commissions me to build a motorcycle, I don't care. I'm gonna still build motorcycles because that's what I love to do. It's a passion of mine.
That's awesome. I would urge anybody that sees this, I know it's a difficult time, but a $25 ticket can literally change the life of someone. And I think that's just amazing. But as we wrap up, is there any shout outs you want to give? Anybody you want to give special mention to?
Oh man. Dude, there's so many. And if I begin to name names,
that's fair.
I'm going to lose somebody, but obviously I just want to say thank you to my wife, for allowing me to take on this endeavor, to David and Cindy from Forgotten Angels for letting me be a part of promoting them and letting people know what they're doing out there for these kids. And you're outside of that, tons of people, and they all are at the top. They've all, put their passion in behind supporting me to support this project, and only good things are going to be to come after this. There's some great things that are on the burner that I cannot talk about online.
All right, fair enough. Ooh, we leave it in suspense. I like it.
Yeah,
awesome.
We'll talk offline, Brian.
Awesome. Well, this is going to wrap it up for today's show. But if you have the means, please help out this amazing charity. And I think this is just another classic example of the moto community doing great things. So I appreciate your time very much. And thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being who you are. And thanks for what you're doing.
Well, Brian, thanks for having me on here tonight to be able to tell everybody about it.
Absolutely.